I'm Michaela Hafley, the Education Director with TAG, and we are going to practice some watercolor techniques. So I have my watercolor paints, I have 2 cups of water, I have a variety of brushes, different sizes, as well as some round brushes and some flat brushes so that you can see the difference. To make watercolors work, you want to dip your brush in water. Then load your brush up with paint. You don't have to dig into the paint. If it seems a little dry, just add some more water to your brush and then just start putting the paint on your paper. You're gonna rinse your brush in 1 cup, and that way you'll have clean water to use with your watercolors. So we're gonna start with simple washes. We're going to do a graduated wash, where we're going to go from a dark color to gradually get it lighter, and to do that, I'm just going to add more water. The more water I add, the lighter the color goes. We're also going to practice what's called a sky wash. So I'm gonna put a lot of paint down on my paper, and then I'm going to add a lot of water on my paper, and then I'm going to add paint to that. And you can see that the paint will bleed or run wherever the water is. This is also known as a sky wash technique, because if you leave some areas white, it can represent clouds. Another technique to try is called a dry brush. So I'm gonna switch to a flat brush. It's kind of tricky because you have to start with a wet brush first, load up your brush with paint, and then start to dry it with a paper towel. So I like to kind of pinch the bristles so they start to spread out, and then you are going to get your brush strokes on there. And you can start to see those brush strokes. This could actually be a little drier. So let me get some more paint on there. Try to get the water out of your brush, and then you'll see the brush strokes appear. So it's a little bit different than the wet on wet, and this is a great way to create texture like hair or grass or rain. Some other fun things to do are to use some common objects. So we're gonna be using salt for a salt technique, and isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol for another technique. So the first one we're going to do is salt. Again, get some water on your brush. I'm going to use a dark color so that you can see it. And this is kind of a science experiment. So we're going to sprinkle a little bit of salt over top of our paint. It doesn't happen automatically, but what's going to occur is that the salt will start to absorb the pigment, and the salt will start to dissolve, so that you'll see what it's going to look like once it's dry. With the rubbing alcohol, I'm going to put some paint down, and then we're going to use what's called a pipette. So you squeeze it and it will get rid of anything that's in the pipette, and if it's in liquid, when you unsqueeze it, it will suck the liquid back up. So this is our rubbing alcohol. I'm going to squeeze the pipette, soak it up in there, and then just a couple of drops. You don't want to do too much on there, otherwise you won't see the effect. And then I can squeeze out the rest and put the lid back on. We can also use some different tools with our watercolor techniques. So we're going to start with just a simple fork. You're going to want the paper to be wet so that you don't hear the scritching sound of the fork. So I didn't use my clean water, but you'll still be able to see what's going to happen. And then you can do straight lines, or you can do curvy lines. And then when you add the paint to it, you'll be able to see the lines of the fork. I'm going to get a dry brush so I can dry up some of that. So you can see those lines start to appear from the fork. See the curvy lines and some of the straight lines. Next, we're going to use simple cardboard. So I'm going to put some color down on my paper. And now I'm going to use my cardboard to move the paint around. And so where the paint kind of pools up, it's going to be a little bit darker, and where I'm scraping the paint, it's going to be a little bit lighter. So this is a great way to kind of create maybe some rock textures. But I can also use my cardboard and get some pigment or some paint on the edge, and I can create stamps. Oh, you can see it's going to start to bleed into my purple. So that's another way that you can use the cardboard. So either to scrape your paint around or to use it for stamps. We can also use a sponge. So you want to make sure that it's a wet sponge. So if it's dried out, just put it in your clean water and squeeze out all the extra. And then you can just simply dip it in your paint. Again, I'm not digging into the paint. I'm just getting some of that paint color on there. And then you can start to put some of that texture down. So you can do it over top of a color that's already dry or in a space that doesn't have any color on it. And then you'll want to rinse that out either in your dirty cup or in the sink, just so that you can use it again with another color. Another fun thing to use is just regular tissue paper, Kleenex, or paper towel. Again, when you put your color down, you can use your paper towel to blot it. So I can take kind of that crumply section and start to lift my color up. I can also stamp with that if you wanted to do that. We also can paint with a Q-tip. So you just want to dip it in some water, dip it in a color, and then you can create dots. You could also draw with it if you wanted to, but it's an easy way to create dots. Another fun thing to use are crayons. So this is a crayon resist. You have to draw with the crayon first, and you want to put enough pressure on there so that you're really getting wax from the crayon onto your paper. Wax and water don't mix, so when I go to add my watercolor on top of it, the crayon will resist where the paint is going to go. So make sure that you have a lot of water with your color, and when you paint over it, you'll see that the crayon will resist where the paint is. If it's not working on part of it, you can take a dry brush and kind of help it out a little bit. The other fun thing is that if you use a white crayon, like I did earlier, you won't see it until you start to try to apply paint over top of it. So that's the crayon resist. The last one can be really messy, but is a lot of fun. So it is splatter paint with a toothbrush. I'm going to dip it in my clean water. I'm going to gently get some paint on there. Again, I'm not digging in the paint. I'm just trying to get some texture on there or some color on there. And then you're going to splatter paint. So make sure that you're splattering just your paper. You don't want it to get all over you or all over somebody else's stuff. So these are some of the watercolor techniques that we'll be practicing, and then you can use these techniques in a painting of your choice.